I would just add a few more dates. I think one thing about the research, we're one of the only countries in the world where the burden of proof for harm, we allow these chemicals to just enter our food system. We have 10,000 chemicals in our food system. Europe, only 400, because they have to show that it's safe before they use it. We're allowed to use it, and then only if there's issues that crop up do people have to do research. So, there's this ridiculous GRAS, generally recognized as safe designation, which is essentially a company self-assesses whether the chemical that they are creating is generally recognized as safe. No one's overseeing it. And Brigham talks about this, compassion for the FDA. They're overwhelmed. There's a lot of stuff to do. It's kind of like a hoarder's house. Where do we even start? I don't necessarily know if I buy that. I think that it's pretty bad and bought off that we have all these chemicals. But they basically just have to self-designate if it's generally recognized as safe, and then it can go into our food system. One thing that I find really interesting is that I really reflect on a lot is what is the difference between a food chemical and a drug? They're all just synthetic molecules that are made in factories, in labs by scientists. Do you know what the difference is? Intended use. So basically, if the intended use is for food, you can synthesize almost anything you want and put it in food. We are being mass drugged and poisoned in our food system with 10,000 virtually unregulated chemicals, which have bought off papers saying that they are safe. I mean, you look at what happened with all the Monsanto litigation about non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. They had to release this whole thing called the Monsanto papers. They were declassified, where they ghost wrote scientific papers saying that glyphosate is safe. So there's all this corruption in there where basically we have 10,000 unregulated chemicals in our food system and we're getting sick as hell, obviously. And then you've got the evidence-based people saying, well, we need to have a 10-year longitudinal study to show that glyphosate is causing XYZ disease. And it's obviously that's not the right approach, because first of all, it is the synergistic combination of all the toxins that are now in our environment that are leading to all these pleiotropic health issues. That's very hard to study. So we have to get our heads out of our ass and use our common sense and realize what's going on, and not wait 10 years with these, NIH funded studies that are going to be corrupted. And, I think, so that's just one thing about the food chemicals. I just wanted to add to your point, Cal, some other dates, you look at the processed food emergence. Processed food really didn't start taking off until these mergers. There was a little bit of a start of it. Ultra processed foods did not exist before World War II. We needed to have shelf stable food for soldiers and things like that we could ship, and so there were maybe some good intentions there. But then there was an opportunity there that got seen, and we can also weaponize the feminist movement against being in the kitchen, you're a slave. You don't, that your value's outside the home. You need to climb the corporate ladder. Here, have this convenience food that we basically made for soldiers, and we're going to tell you that this is actually your liberation. So of course we got people not cooking. Families aren't eating together anymore. Kids are eating 67% of children's calories now are ultra processed foods. These means foods that come from a factory made by food scientists, not just processed, ultra processed. The highest form of processing, 67% of calories. Then you go to the 1970s and we have the advent of high fructose corn syrup, which, as Callie talks about, this preceded some of the mergers, but high fructose corn syrup is a weapon of mass destruction that basically food scientists used an understanding about hibernating animals like bears who fructose is one of the only types of calories where instead of making you feel satiated, it makes you more hungry. And this is evolutionarily, and we knew this. In the fall, when animals are preparing for hibernation and they start eating fructose-rich berries, they need to put on a ton of fat for winter. And so there's a feed-forward mechanism with fructose where it actually gets the bears to be hungry and even violent to outcompete other animals to get as many berries as possible in a short period of time to lay 3D print fat for winter. So you have the scientists understanding this and say, hey, we can make liquid fructose 1,000 times more potent than the fructose you'd find in berries. Same molecule, but in higher concentration. And we can add it to everything. We can add it to salad dressing. We're going to add it to ketchup. We're going to add it to children's school lunches. We're going to add it, obviously, to sodas. And we're going to make people insatiable. We're going to make their bodies and their brains think that they're preparing for winter that's never coming. And there has been research that shows that high fructose corn syrup is associated with violence, ADHD in kids, all of these different things. Just last thing I'll mention, flash forward 1986, I think another very important date, which is the date when the litigation went through that said we couldn't sue vaccine manufacturers. And the Vaccine Safety Act, that's a very important date in the whole history because it is one of the first times where we were able to pass legislation through Congress that said that pharmaceutical companies could not be sued for wrongdoing. And that still is present today. They basically put together a paltry little fund that people could apply to get no fault reimbursements for vaccine harm, but you cannot sue the company. So you start to get companies being legally immune from wrongdoing, which has then accelerated, and they're now starting to try and push things like that for pesticides as well. So that's just some of the history of like why we are where we are today. It's not rocket science. This has all been very institutionalized and structured, and it's the last 50 years. Like, we can undo all of this with leadership. And so that's just a little bit of the picture of how we are where we are today.